if and only if a situation arises where the only way that you can save your own life, the life of someone you love, or the life of someone employed by the five families is to take his, then by all means, do what you need to. This is Bedtime Stories, Grownup Edition, Operation Anteater, Part 13. When we left off, Catherine had dropped a bomb at the round table. She'd informed everyone gathered all about Sincere's dirty deeds at the Gentlemen's Club in Japan. He'd been relieved of his duties, and while he remained at the table, he was under guard. When Natalia walked in, he almost passed out. And everyone gathered at the round table, and everyone connected to it remotely, got an earful about what he'd been up to when he returned to the States. Catherine had hired Courtney for another assignment. She was tasked with keeping an eye on Sincere and running interference between him and her sister, uncovering his plan and preventing him from bringing it to fruition. Months earlier, when they arrived in Miami, after they were done with their job in Japan, Catherine had told Courtney, continue doing what you're doing. Don't be too eager. Don't pretend to be too easy either. Make him work to convince you. But don't make it too hard for him to do so, because the last thing we need is for him to doubt his ability to use you and come up with an alternative plan that you won't be able to interrupt. If you can, try to keep your mother and your sister in the dark. I know that's a lot to ask, but they're not professionals. They might have a hard time playing their roles. We need their reaction to seeing the two of you together to be authentic. And we need them to do whatever they would naturally do to keep themselves safe and dissuade Sincere. I'm sure he won't take advantage of them, but I prefer that he at least have opportunities to change his mind. Courtney said, that's fine. My job necessitates that I lie to them often. What I need to know is, do I have permission to kill him? If that's what's necessary to stop him. Catherine said, if and only if a situation arises where the only way that you can save your own life, the life of someone you love, or the life of someone employed by the five families is to take his, then by all means, do what you need to. But hear me when I say that the expectation is that he makes it out of this alive. Otherwise, my plan for his replacement will not work. If you need an incentive to justify incapacitating him, if a situation arises where killing him might be your first choice, believe me when I tell you that any situation where your sister, you, or your mother are in any physical danger as a result of Sincere's actions is absolutely going to be addressed at a roundtable meeting. And if that means that we have to detain him until after the situation with the International Trafficking Organization is resolved, that is exactly what we will do. I'm sure you know that your father, Javier, and Manny would absolutely make a case for terminating Sincere's contract with breathing if such a circumstance arose, and Saint would have no other option but to support such a decision. Allowing him to live, even if he puts one of you all in danger, would not be synonymous with letting him off the hook. On the contrary, it would seal his fate. It would also secure his replacement and make his death a whole lot easier to explain to his sisters. Courtney agreed to Catherine's terms, and then she made a difficult call. Courtney said, hey sis, how you doing? When Natalia said she was fine, Courtney said, I'm going to be heading your way in a few days, and I'm bringing company. When Courtney said that company was Sincere, Natalia lost it. Before Courtney could even tell her to lie that she and Sincere were an item, Natalia said, let me guess, Catherine has pulled you into her schemes. I told her that I would not participate in any plan that would lure Sincere into a trap and force Saint to have to choose between me and his brother. Again, Courtney said, I know, and you've made this conversation that much easier. I've had a lengthy discussion with Catherine. She has a plan, and I'm on board. Neither she nor I am asking you to participate. I'm asking you to let it be what it's going to be and to do whatever you need to do to protect yourself. I swear to God, sis, the options are few right now. If I didn't agree to do this, I have zero doubt that Sincere would find you and do whatever it is that he's planning to do. At least this way, I'll be right there and I'll have your back and your front. After about a 20-minute back and forth, Natalia realized that she was not going to be able to dissuade her sister. So she gave up. She said, fine, I'm going to prepare myself. And I'm not going to tell mommy. I'm going to let her have her natural reaction. And if she breaks her foot off in your John Brown hind parts, you will have earned it. Goodbye. And then she hung up and called Javier. When she ran it all down to Javier, Javier said, of course I will inform Manny. And I'll call you back if he's of a different mind. But I'm pretty confident that he'll be in agreement with me. I think that your sister and Catherine are both right. Sincere has proven that no matter what anyone else says or does, this competition between him and his brother that he's the only one participating in takes priority over everything. What's right, what other people desire, and even what's in his own best interests. He's willing to ensure his own demise, as opposed to just walking away and accepting your no. And that's dangerous. The only absolute way to ensure whatever he's planning fails is for us all to conspire against him. That will require your participation. I get why you don't want to be involved in a plan, but Sincere has already included you in his. And no matter how you ice that cake, he is absolutely going to serve himself up to his brother on a silver platter. And when all of this is addressed, when this war is over, it will be Saint who'll have to decide Sincere's fate. When Natalia hung up the phone with Javier, she went into her war room and attempted to pray heaven down. Her worship was interrupted when she got a follow-up call from Javier saying, "I've provided Manny all the information you provided me. He's called Catherine and spoke with her himself. He's also called your sister himself, and he'd like to speak with you." Then Javier put Manny on the phone, and Natalia said, "Hello?" Manny said, "Mija, I understand you found yourself in a very uncomfortable position. I absolutely hate that it's come to this. You have my word that if Sincere touches a hair on your head, I will kill him myself." Meanwhile, in Miami, Courtney plopped down on the bed in her suite of rooms, sent Ezra a text letting him know that she would not be available to connect with him because she'd just taken another assignment. She powered her phone off, said a quick prayer, and attempted to sleep off her jet lag. 9 days later, Sincere had sufficiently convinced Courtney that they should give dating a go, and if she wanted, he would accompany her to visit her sister and her mother. She could make up for being off the grid for over a month, and they could be a united front when she told them about the new man in her life. Besides, he owed Natalia an apology anyway, and his brother would appreciate him doing it in person and having a chaperone. When they arrived in Maryland at the St. James safe house, Courtney insisted that they have separate rooms. The men who Catherine had assigned to Courtney and Sincere's detail while they were in Maryland had all been sufficiently debriefed by Ezra. So they knew that Sincere was not really in charge. He was a mark. Courtney was on assignment, and they needed to run any instructions that Sincere gave them, either by Courtney or Ezra, before carrying them out, no matter how innocuous they seemed, because Sincere was crafty. Javier had provided detailed information and instructions to Natalia and Miss Eugenia's team, and all systems were a go. Sincere and Courtney had done a whole lot of heavy petting, making out, and flirting with disaster. But Courtney already knew that the only way she was actually going to sell that she had fallen for Sincere's manipulations was to give him that good. So once they were settled in their respective rooms, Courtney said, "Before I go and face my mother and my sister, I want to see what Maryland has to offer." Sincere said, "You have no idea how much I was hoping you would say that. I've been doing some research, and there's a few sites I want to see. There's a restaurant on the safe list and an outdoor shopping center that I can get locked down so we can go and blow a couple of bags." Courtney said, "I'm in. And maybe when we get back, if you're on your best behavior and you show me that you really know how to show a girl a good time, we can end this night with a happy ending." Sincere said, "Now you talking. Let's go." And then Sincere and Courtney spent the better part of 7 hours seeing the sights, shopping, changing so that they were appropriately dressed for dinner at the 5-star restaurant on the Five Families' safe list. And then they ended their night with champagne on a private yacht and the best nookie that Sincere had, or at least that he could recall, in months. He couldn't remember what he had done with those 2 tenders in Japan. When he woke up the next day, he didn't even feel like he'd gotten his money's worth, but he was too embarrassed to complain. So he settled for a self-inflicted orgasm, and he was all tied up. By the time he and Courtney got back to Miami, he didn't know what to do with himself. When he reunited with Janelle, and she wasn't coming up off none either. The 9 days of foreplay between him and Courtney had him ready to explode. And if she ain't give it up on that yacht, he was going to conclude that she was playing him. So Courtney had perfectly timed giving it up, and she certainly made it worth the wait. She put on the performance of a lifetime, and if Sincere's proclivities weren't so deplorable, she probably would have turned him out. They went round after round, and it was a good thing he booked the yacht for several hours. When they boarded at the pier, they were both walking funny. And when they returned to the safe house, they picked up where they left off. Despite having separate rooms, they woke up the next day in Sincere's bed. And after showering, dressing, and enjoying breakfast, Courtney called Natalia and arranged to visit her and her mother at the townhouse where they were staying. In the back seat of the chauffeured car, Courtney told Sincere, "Now listen, babe. This is a very delicate situation. You and I have spent quite a bit of time together, so I know that your intentions are good. I know that you're over my sister, and you have no problem with her and Saint being an item and riding off into the sunset, living happily ever after. But you have to remember that you met her first. And just like this isn't you and your brother's first rodeo with having a woman choose between the two of you, this isn't our first rodeo either. And like I told you, I've been in your shoes. I've had a man who I met first choose my sister. So I have firsthand experience with getting over it and moving on. And like we talked about a week ago, the main reason why I was hesitant to believe that you were actually into me was one of those times I moved on to that guy's brother. And unlike you, it was simply for revenge. I took that nigga down through there. When I was done with him, I let both them niggas catch me in bed with their damn daddy." Sincere laughed hysterically. And when he was done laughing, he said, "I swear to God, that is funny as hell. You know you downright diabolical, right?" Courtney said, "I'm not as devious as I once was. But you can imagine why it was a little difficult to believe that you didn't have bad intentions." Sincere said, "Of course. And like I told you, I'd never had a woman pick my brother. It was definitely a blow to my ego. But getting to know you was just what I needed to not only get over it, but to realize that your sister picked the right brother and the right sister landed in my lap. And after last night and this morning, the right sister landed in my bed." Then he kissed Courtney and tweaked one of her nipples. Courtney giggled and Sincere said, "Truth be told, I knew in my heart of hearts that it was you all along that night at the Trinidadian spot when I had taken Natalia on that date and you showed up to pretend to be her, to throw the traffickers off her scent. I knew she couldn't have never pulled an operation like that off. She's entirely too innocent. And the very few kisses her stingy behind was willing to give up didn't hold a candle to that one you'd given me in the parking lot. At the time, I told myself that it was all a part of your show. But now that I've had the real thing, I know that my initial instincts were right on the money." Then he kissed her passionately again, and when they pulled away, Courtney said breathlessly, "So here's the thing. I think you should let me do all of the talking when we get to my sister's place. Because while everything that you just said made me feel all warm and fuzzy inside, it is not going to help us make our case. Now, she'll be glad to see that you won't be standing in between her and Saint. She got a big ego too." Sia said, "You worried that she gonna change her mind?" Courtney said, "Hell no. I know her, so I know she's gonna hear that as an insult. And insulting her is not going to make her want to give us a blessing. And we are absolutely going to need her blessing in order to get my mother's. Because as I understand, you did not make a good first impression with my mother." Sincere said, "How about I let you handle Natalia and you let me handle Mrs. Jimenez?" Courtney said, "No, how about I at least butter her up first? You follow my lead and practice your Easter speech." And Sincere guffawed. When the new couple arrived at the townhouse, all parties were in their appropriate positions. The property and the surrounding area was crawling with soldiers, but they were completely undetectable to the casual observer. And when Courtney rang the doorbell, Sincere was surprised when Natalia was the one who opened it, because he'd peeked the security on the outside and figured that the security on the inside would be just as tight. With a war going on, Natalia should not be opening the door herself, even with a video doorbell. And after initial salutations, Sincere said as much. Courtney said, "My sister is hard-headed. You should know that by now. My father insisted on all the soldiers the Lopez family could spare, and she dismissed half of them." And Natalia didn't respond, because she had made her position clear. She was going to go along to get along, but she was not contributing to any falsehoods. She knew that the soldiers inside her borrowed townhouse had been instructed to lay low and keep an extremely low profile anytime Sincere was anywhere near the premises. After letting them in, she said, "Mommy, we have guests." Sincere looked at Courtney and raised an eyebrow. And at the same time, they both realized that Natalia hadn't even told their mother that the two of them were coming. Because Miss Eugenia walked into the room and said, "Oh my God." And Courtney said, "Calm down, Mommy. It's okay. I can explain." Then she looked at Natalia and said, "You couldn't have gave her a heads up?" Natalia said, "Absolutely not. I was not doing your dirty work." Miss Eugenia said, "Somebody better tell me what the hell is going on here." Sincere said, "It's wonderful to see you again, Mrs. Jimenez." Natalia said, "I wish I could say the feeling was mutual." And Courtney said, "He didn't say it was nice to see you. He said it was nice to see Mommy. Can I speak to you two in another room, please?" The three ladies headed into the room that Natalia was using as her office. Courtney closed the door behind them, rolled her eyes at Natalia, and then looked at her mother and said, So, Mommy, here's the thing. As soon as Courtney told her mother that she and Sincere were an item, Miss Eugenia looked like she was gonna pass out. She had to sit down in Natalia's office chair. She didn't say a word, though. She sat, breathed, and listened as her daughter explained. And Courtney did her thing. She put her skills as a covert to good use, because she'd absolutely convinced her mother that if nothing else, she was buying what Sincere was selling. She could not convince her mother, though, that Sincere was on the up and up and he wasn't playing her for a damn fool. And that's precisely what Miss Eugenia told her daughter when she finished her Easter speech. Miss Eugenia said, "I have never taken you for a damn fool. And I know that over the years, you two have found yourselves in situations where one of you met a guy, and when he met your sister, his interest wavered. But both of you have always made me proud with the way that you handled those situations. Instead of fighting over the guy, you'd both pass because you understood the importance of being a man's first and only choice. Now I get how you might see this situation as being different, considering that your sister found herself in a situation where she was accidentally dating both brothers. But considering how Sincere took the news, how he handled your sister and his brother, and the fact that the man has a baby on the way, and his history with women is the reason why we had to relocate from Miami to Maryland. I know that I've been pressuring you as the oldest daughter to find a nice fella and settle down, to stop flitting around the world like a butterfly from hither to thither. But I did not mean for you to show up at the house where your sister and I are hiding with the very man we're hiding from. And I know you're not that hard up for a man that you'd settle for your sister's sloppy seconds, especially knowing that that man's elevator does not go all the way to the top floor. Besides, I don't know what he could have told you to convince you to even go there with him. Shouldn't you be smarter than that, considering that you're one of the Five Families' secret agents or special agents or whatever they call it, caught off guard, but well adept at maintaining her cover with her family? Courtney said, "Mommy, what are you talking about? I am not a special secret agent. I told you that." Miss Eugenia said, "Girl, cut the crap. When all of that mess went down in Miami, your sister was blurting out all kind of stuff. And one of the things that she blurted out was that the two of you used to play tricks on men. And she believed that you played one on Sincere when you were on some special assignment where you were pretending to be her." She said, and Courtney turned to Natalia and said, "Wow, I was trying to keep you from getting hurt." Natalia said, "Then you should have just came out and told me what you knew." Courtney said, "Even if I did, that would not have changed that whole situation between you, Saint, and Sincere. It would have still happened." Miss Eugenia said, "Don't change the subject, little girl. Look me in my face and tell me a bold-faced lie." Courtney said, Miss Eugenia said, "Courtney Nichelle Jimenez, look me in my eyes and tell me that the first time you met Sincere was not when you were on an assignment for the Five Families, where you pretended to be your sister." And Courtney was almost stuck. She had mastered telling lies, but she had yet to master looking her mother in the eye after she called her by her full government name, called out her truth, and dared her to lie. What she had mastered, though, was telling the truth wrapped up in a lie. And that's precisely what she did. Courtney said, "It is not what you think, Mommy. You know that I am actually a real estate investor for the Lopez family. If you do a quick property search, you'll find my name on the record of the land that this townhouse sits on and every other townhouse in this neighborhood. They're all owned by the Lopez Organization, and I negotiated the contract for the development of this subdivision. I've worked hard to make a name for myself and work my way up in the Lopez legitimate business. As a result, I'm in constant communication with Mr. Lopez directly. And the day that he found out that Sincere was going on a date with Natalia for the second time, and whoever was tracking him had seen him with her during their first date, so they would most likely try to follow her when she left the restaurant where they were meeting. He did not have enough time. And you know there aren't that many Afro-Latinas who look like us. So he couldn't find anybody who would be a close enough match to her and was available at such short notice. Since it wouldn't take much for me to pass as her, he asked me to do it. All I had to do was be seen going in the front door, sit inside the restaurant until their date was over. While Natty was being snuck out the back, I was to be seen going out the front with Sincere. He walked me to my car, and when I left, I was tailed. I have no idea what happened after the team who was responsible for intercepting that tail did the job they were paid to do. I made a little extra change and got me a little excitement. Miss Eugenia asked, "Wait a minute, why would he think that that was something you could do?" Courtney said, "Well, one, because it was simple. And two, because I was under constant surveillance. When I arrived at the restaurant, there was a soldier hiding in my back seat. There were soldiers keeping an eye on the car to make sure nobody put a bug on it. And I didn't even have to drive a mile before the bad guys were intercepted." Not to mention, he know who my daddy is. Natalia's a little better with hand-to-hand combat. But I'm a bad girl with a pistol. Miss Eugenia chuckled and said, girl, you are something else. Well, if that's all you've done, let it be all you do. Courtney said, yes, ma'am. Then Miss Eugenia asked, now what exactly did that man do that let you know that he was not compatible with your sister? And what makes you think he's compatible with you? Courtney said, when he walked me to my car, he gave me a goodnight kiss. I had no problem with that because it made sense. We wanted to make it look like we had a good date. But sincere being sincere, he did too much. He felt all over my booty, stuck his tongue down my throat, and dragged the kiss out entirely too long for a man who was supposed to actually be interested in another woman, especially if that other woman was my sister. Miss Eugenia said, Lord have mercy. Courtney said, and we've talked about it. He said that he just got carried away. He didn't expect for the kiss to be that magnetic. And quiet as it's kept, I didn't expect it to be that magnetic either. I resisted, but I had to make it look good. And a good kiss is a good kiss. So I couldn't help but enjoy it a little bit. Obviously, I've kissed him for real since then. And it wasn't a fluke. Miss Eugenia rolled her eyes and Natalia sucked her teeth. Courtney said, don't do that. I didn't plan this. It just happened. I know I told you that I've been out of the country all this time. But the truth is I was only out of the country for a little while. The rest of the time I was in Miami, staying at the St. James Estate, getting to know Sincere better, and working on some real estate projects for the Lopez family. Miss Eugenia said, I've heard enough. Courtney said, so you gonna support me? Miss Eugenia said, I've heard enough from you. I need to talk to him. When Courtney turned to the door, Miss Eugenia said, alone. And I think you and your sister need to have a conversation alone too. When Miss Eugenia left the room, Natalia looked at Courtney and said, that was good. Courtney said, you think so? Natalia said, I've had time to think. And I talked to Javier and Manny. I'm in. The two sisters hugged, and then they watched and listened as Miss Eugenia interrogated Sincere via the hidden security cameras that were placed in the kitchen.
You're a fucking adult and you gotta get it together. You're a dick and you're manipulative as fuck.